Okay, good afternoon, and welcome back to another one of our parenting workshops. And this one is our last in the series that we're going to do, and it's on the topic of multi-level engagement. I'm Dana Robinson. I work for Arts and Scraps, and behind the scenes is Patrick, who's going to be taking care of all those technical things. And we have a guest, Tawana, who is going to have a few words somewhere in this process. First of all, I just want to say welcome, and we're going to look at our agenda and see how we're going to do things. And the first thing that we have up is we're going to, looking at the agenda, we have our welcome, and then we're going to have this introduction. We had that icebreakers next, and then we'll have our multi-level talk, hands-on activities, and a reflection. So in this icebreaker, next screen, what I'd like you to do is to go to your chat box. And in your chat box, I'd like you to identify some unique thing about you that you believe no one else in this group shares. And when that's done, what we'll do is we'll go back and we'll look at the inputs. And as we consider each one, if there's someone else who shares what you thought was unique about you, then you have to come up with another unique thing about you. And I can start it off. I can say that mine is that I used to dunk basketballs. And I don't think anybody else in this group has that as a past history. If you do, you can give me a hands up, and then I'll have to come up with something else that I think is unique about me. If we have any other participants, feel free. We'll give ourselves about 15 seconds. I'll go to my chat box and see if anybody else has said anything there. Nope, it's kind of empty. Okay. So, having done that, we'll now go to our next screen. And the next screen has us talking a little bit about Arts and Scraps. And I'll say briefly that Arts and Scraps is a nonprofit that has been around for 30 plus years. And essentially what we do is we take things that are scheduled for being thrown away, put into a landfill, destroyed, burned, etc. And if those things are cool and clean and safe for children to handle, we appropriate those things, and generally they're given to us free because otherwise they would have been thrown away. And we have tons of volunteer hours utilized to separate those things out, to process them if they need to be cut or whatever, and package. And then we put those packages of these, what we call scraps, in front of children, and then we give them a challenge. We also sometimes take a variety of scraps out to wherever children gather, and we have make and takes out of the same kinds of materials. And so we have a store on wheel, we have a classroom within our store. We come to homes for birthday parties. We come to wherever kids gather, from preschool sites to school sites and to adult centers, as we process with any age level. And if you go to artsandscraps.org, our website, you'll find out more than you ever wanted to know about Arts and Scraps. And I suggest and hope that you would visit that site to learn about us. Now, next we'll go to the multi-level engagement simplified. And first we'll have a word from Tawana. She'll give us some thoughts about our session today. She's a person who works with Arts and Scraps. So Tawana, have at it.
Good evening. I like to talk about teaching children of multiple ages in the same lesson time. A lot of us are homeschooling our children, and that could look like teaching different children at the same time in the same setting. It's important to know that we all have different learning styles. Learning styles group ways that people learn. The term learning style speaks about understanding that every student learns differently. There's no right mix, nor is there your style fixed. There's quizzes online that you could take. They could recognize your style, and therefore maybe you could understand another style. There's three primary learning styles. Visual, if you're a visual learner, then you learn by looking and seeing. If you're an auditory learner, you learn by hearing and listening. If you are kinesthetic or tactical learner, you learn by touching and doing. So group similar students by age and ability, and have students teach each other. It's amazing how the younger children can learn from this. I also say it's no shame in doing what I call best practices. That kind of means to take what works best, give feedback, give ongoing feedback, and that could look like just being present, yet encourage independence. All students, no matter how young, can work, are capable of working independently. Having someone learn independently could free you up for some one-on-one time that another child may be needing. And know and understand that we accomplish nothing by ourselves. Use tried and true methods, observe learning styles, and give feedback, and know how you and your child works together.
That is an excellent. That's been excellent. I love that. Thank you, Tawana. That's you must be an educator because that is straight out of the textbook. And so, on that note, we're going to go back to the to our PowerPoint, and we'll look at how that fits in with this notion of multi-level teaching. And so, I have these terms, and they're not significant to anyone but me, but they help to keep me on focus with what I want to talk about. So I have the term multi-level up there because I want to indicate that I borrowed that from an educational term, which is authentic multi-level teaching, but it has to do with teaching content. And of course, we're dealing with crafts for learning and for fun. So instead of using the word teaching in there, I would be using the word engagement. So it's multi-level engagement because I'm focusing in on crafts. And also, I'm not emphasizing authentic because in education, we know that if you involve children in things that they care about and things that really have meaning to them, then they're more likely to engage in it and more likely to retain it. Well, in the area of crafts, we just want to have fun, and we want to slip learning into the process of having fun. So we're not so much interested in authentic learning, but we are interested in engaging and challenging all kids in the home. And that can be a very challenging thing. So in the multi-level situation, there are activities that can be tailored to challenge levels of students' abilities in the same home. Inclusive is here because I want to say that we want this to be something that everybody uses. So we're choosing a material, one material that we bring out to a variety of age groups, and we ask them to all be able to play with those things using that one material so that all of them can be engaged in the home, including the adults there. We want to say that this is not unlike family board games, except that we're not asking that you intentionally collaborate. So that means we can have children working in separate parts of a room, and we can have them doing separate tasks, but they're using the same common material, and it's going to be hands-on as opposed to just having fun with board games. I have broad because, as I said, we're using a common material. It should be and this is a concept that's a little difficult. It's more educational, but in education, we tend to take concepts, very specific concepts, and then we break them up and try to address them to different children. So you're going from specific to reaching a broad group of people. Well, in the case of this multi-level teaching, we're actually picking a broad situation, a broad material, and then we're going down and addressing it to specific learning levels. And so it's just a sort of reverse on how things are normally done. And we want it to be challenging, which means engaging. So as you increase the age or the learning skill sets of the students in your home, you want to increase the amount of challenge in it, make it more engaging. So, for example, if you have a kindergartner and you're dealing with shapes, basic shapes in your room, you might say, look around the room and find different items in the room that represent certain shapes. There would be some things, maybe a round mirror or a rectangular desk or a square side table, etc. That's enough of a challenge for a kindergartner. You might take a high schooler and you might phrase the challenge this way. You may say, what's the advantages or disadvantages to building rooms with or without corners? And so in that case, an older child and even adult would have to think about having a round room with no corners. And they're still dealing with shapes, of course, but then it's more engaging because they're really forced to think of what advantages would I have, what disadvantages would I have, and that kind of a challenge. So it's going to increase in challenge as you go up. Then you're going to increase the application as you increase the age. And application meaning that it's thought-provoking. That's what I mean by that. So in my examples, again, I would say that if you had kindergartners, you might ask them to match shapes with colors. And but within high school, for example, you might ask them to construct a three-dimensional object or structure given set parameters. So if it was something that you might say, I would like you to construct a ball that has a specific surface area, or that would hold a specific volume. Or you might ask them to construct a prism that's a certain height and a certain base, but then volume-wise, it has to be specific. So that becomes a much more challenging and thought-provoking application for an older child. And then in the interaction, what I had with that was, oh, I put them out of order, didn't I? Yeah, so the interaction is how much time they spend on a task. So we know that the attention span of younger children is short. So if you had an hour's time that you were going to spend on a craft with your family of children, that time might look like 4 small activities, 4 short activities of 15 minutes each for a younger child, but that same length of time might be only 1/4 of the time that it's going to take a high schooler to complete. They may need 4-hour sessions to complete it, but they would be comfortable with doing 1/4 of the work in an hour. And so that's so that their attention would stay with the task. And so you have to be cognizant of those things. So those are the things we want to be cognizant of. Now, What I'd like to happen now is for us to go into a video. I've linked us to it, and I've already taught a lesson concerning tangrams. And the tangrams are a wonderful activity that's very much tailored to what we do at Arts and Scraps with these white stickies. And that's why in our list of supplies, I ask that you bring those. So we're going to look at a few minutes of it just to see how to construct the tangram. And then from there, we will go into how we could tailor these things to our particular children in our home. So each of us may have a separate task depending on the age of the children that we have in front of us. So if we can pull that up, and we'll listen to it. About 5 minutes of it, I think, is all we need to see. And this was a video that we did. It's one of the first ones that we linked to our website when COVID started. And we wanted to have some activity for children who are homebound to be able to do crafts with some of our materials virtually. So we came up with a set of videos, and me and a few others at the Arts and Scraps had them posted. And this was one that I really enjoyed, and it lends itself to this kind of activity of using one material to engage children of multi-levels. And I guess it's kind of pulling up, taking a bit of time. And I'm going to go on to screen sharing and see if mine responds any faster. Mm-hmm.
Do you not see it, George? Or Dana, I have it pulled up here.
Oh, is it in the share screen?
Yep, I am screen sharing.
Oh, I don't see it on mine. It says waiting for video.
Oh.
That's interesting. And you're screen sharing it, right?
Absolutely. Yes, I am.
Arts and Scraps items. I hear it now. Challenge. I will demonstrate the basics of making the tangram pieces and show a few of the challenges, which in this case will be for ages 3 to 103. How about that? Items of use will be the white stickies. Again, I don't see it. Paper.
Okay. We're going to start that over real quick.
Okay.
It wasn't showing up.
And you know what? You can start probably about a minute in because I thought they had edited that sloppy beginning out. Yeah, that's good. Thing is the template and making that. But I'm not hearing it. Can you hear that, Patrick? Are you able to hear it?
Yeah, it's playing fine for me.
Okay, well, that's good enough.
Okay. You can't hear it though?
No, but go ahead, that's fine. Sides, and then we mark a 1/4-inch line on 2 sides. And already marked. So the way it works is like this. First of all, use my sticky as a base piece. Since you have to be very, very careful, line it up and make sure it's very much straight on the edge here. And then I can make my straight edge for that first line and I don't have to worry about it. order to get these center points, I've got a square piece of paper the exact same size as a square. And I simply fold it. Fold this to the center on both wings. And then I use the marker to mark the points. So those are my 3 points. And so then it's just a matter of, at the top, lining it up and marking off the center. Side, we said we needed a center mark and a quarter mark. So I line it up and I make my center mark, or my quarter mark and my center mark. Bottom, we just need the center mark. So again, I go down, make my center mark. And then on the other side, left side to us, I just need the bottom quarter and that's it. Okay. Once I've got that, I just folded a piece of paper to make a straight edge and I start connecting. So I've numbered it. The first one is already in, that's number 1. The second one I want is this corner to this corner. So I'm going to just simply place it on. I'm very careful to make sure I'm lining up well because that's very, very critical to having pieces that will work for us when we get finished. And then the second one, of course, was the third line, and that's from half to half. Very careful to line it up. I'm going to skip that and show you all the markings. Once I've got all the markings, then I cut my bottom off. I'm always going to be very careful to use a sharp scissor and cut away got my piece cut off the bottom. Now I have my square, but before I cut the rest of the pieces, I'm going to cover the other side, my sticky side. And in this case, I'm just using a plain brown piece, and I'm going to get it from this big piece here. And I'm just going to stick it down. And then I'm going to cut all the salvage away. Make sure it's down good. Just simply cut away. And when I get finished with that, I'll have a piece like, I had a piece already cut that I was going to use. Here's where I finish this. Trying to save time. And then I just cut my pieces. And I'm going to start first with my center cut. Bottom piece off, straight line. Then this piece comes off. This piece, number 6 and 7. Those are your tanagram pieces. Now that we have our pieces cut, it's time to border a template so that we have a place to place them. This is for the very youngest children. You want to have that diagram so that they'll be able to fit the pieces in very easily. And I border them by taking little strips of my sticky and putting it around the box, making sure I stayed on the outside of the box. And then I just simply, for a child that's young, getting them in with these shapes is probably challenging enough. And we have an additional aid for that young age group where we can add photographs. So that's a plain background and that gives them that. But then, let's see here. an example for the young. In this case, I took a clear cellophane bag and I cut it out, and it had this nice Easter egg pattern on it, so I just use that. And the kids have the advantage of using both the patterns to try to match the pieces and the shapes. And so that's good for the preschoolers. And that's as much as you'll want them to be involved in is actually doing these with the visuals. So I'm gonna have that in the wrong place, maybe down here. Nope, here, nope. This goes somewhere. But anyway, you can see where this would be fun for the younger kids, and actually it's challenging enough for me too, isn't it? Right, and this here, and okay, I have something in the wrong place. I can see that over here. So where's the other little piece? Oh, that's right. Oh, I see. So this is wrong. So there. Let's go here. These have pictures on them. These came from supermarket ads. I just took them and cut them out because they're graphic and the kids can do those. For older kids, they don't need the back penciled in or inked in. Just the shapes and the colors will be enough for them. And you can scale on up to other shapes. So the whole point of Tangram is to have these figures, two-dimensional figures of animals, people in different action poses, etc. And you create a silhouette. And a silhouette a lot of times is just black thin silhouettes. And your point is to try to figure out how those pieces go in. So I came up with a little house. And after I came up with the house, I outlined it and I bordered it. And then again, for the little kids, you'll want to have these lines in so that they can see them. But the older kids, they don't need them. And that's going to be the challenge for us. And it's really quite interesting. You can put anything, stickies on the non-sticky mix. You can use magazine photos, actual photos of people. This is a Audis ad. And that's very challenging. And then we go into, for the even better. So we have online.
You're still muted, Dana.
Okay, I think that's enough of that. Certainly it's worth looking at the rest of it for getting more details on that. But when we look at something like that, obviously we think, well, there's no preschooler or a kindergartner that's going to be able to accomplish doing all that critical measuring and cutting. So in the case of you dealing with these materials for a very young child, it may be just enough to have a 4-shape situation that they're confronted with. So instead of having the 7-piece tangram, it might be enough to have it just cut at diagonals. And you would be measuring, if it's a very young child, from corner to opposite corner, or you would be measuring if it was a very young child from the center line to the center line. And that's enough of detail for a youngster. So now what happens? You may say, I'm gonna help my child with numbers, for example, or you may have a nice, and in this case, it's about a 2 by 2 inch square. You might have a single object that takes up a 2 inch by 2 inch space. And that's what you would stick on the opposite side. And you can actually have the child to stick it on. And then you would do the cutting of the pieces. So after that's done, then the challenge for that age group would be just to get that figure again by manipulating these 4 pieces. And um, you might decide that you want to have, if it's a picture, it's really easy, because if it's a face, for example, it's the symmetry of a face and all, and where the hair is and the mouth will lead itself to a young kid being able to come up with that. Or if it's a big O, for example, as a shape that you printed out, if they had an O next to them, they could figure out how to put those shapes together to reconstruct that O. And the fun thing about this, engaging thing about it, is that you give the child choice as to what they want to cover their sticky with. And they also get a chance to challenge, after they make those stickies, others. Now, how does this go all the way up? Well, Tangram is a very popular activity. There are tons of templates online. If I were addressing a high schooler with this same activity, or an adult, for example, I might challenge them to come up with an entire alphabet with every letter taking all 7 pieces of the tangram and coming up with their own alphabet. And there are alphabets out there, but they would be challenged to make their own. And so the freedom of it is that you get to decide what material you're going to cover your base with, or you may decide what pattern you're going to cover it with. There's a lot of room for the child having some autonomy in their process, and that gives them ownership. But you could see that in a task like that would be very challenging. And then there are the templates that are online. In the video, you notice that I said when you're dealing with trying to do puzzles for the very young, then you want to leave the lines apparent so that they're simply dealing with the shapes. So if I were asking a kid to put this back together, and let's say it was an actual tangram with all the 7 shapes, I would leave those lines down on the base piece that I have bordered, and then they know that that size is going to be one of those 2 larger triangles. It's just which one, and you get to fool around with it. But as you get older, you just simply get a shape. It may be the shape of a man running, or the shape of a cat, or whatever. If you go and Google tangram, you'll see there's thousands of different shapes that have already been developed. And if you don't download the answer key, then in some cases you could spend a lot of time trying to construct it. And that's good, and I like that, but I much more prefer to challenge kids to make their own shapes, and then they can make their shapes in secret, and then challenge an adult or another peer to come up with the configuration necessary to put that together. So that's where we are with that. So what are we gonna do? If you have in your home different age children, including yourself, then your mindset is to figure out what would you do as a challenge for each of the children in your age, the different age of the children in your home. We've already suggested that you're not going to give scissors to a preschooler. And you don't necessarily have to do an educational thing with them. It doesn't have to be about numbers or shapes. It can be just the pure fun of putting a family portrait on it and having them cut it. And it may not even, they may not decide that they want to have straight lines. They may want to cut it truly like more like a puzzle into 4 curving lines, etc. And then they would have that choice to do that, and you would help them with bordering it with the stickies, and then they try to put it back together themselves, and they can challenge others. It could be blocks that have patterns. I've got paper. I'm always getting any kind of interesting paper, so these are big enough patterns on this sheet of paper that would help a kid to associate different parts of this flowered pattern. Even have these color templates here, and there's numbers that would help. More involved would be something like this, where it's a repeating pattern, and that would be more difficult. But if you had a tangram for a middle schooler or a elementary schooler, it would be enough for them to try to take 7 pieces of these repeating patterns and try to make it fit together in that way. And so wherever there's paper and the easiest thing, of course, is just to simply get a solid color. And the solid colors are always beneficial when you have a shape that's doing something. So in the case of a shape that's doing something, we wouldn't want to have necessarily the distractions. And I'll show you what I mean by that. I've got one here that I did on the video. So I like this ethnic print. No, it wasn't the ethnic print. This was, I simply took, in this case, pieces of metallic and bright colored paper, and I layered it on the square piece. Well, this is not in the shape of a square. Now it's in the shape of a rectangle. So you can see that there's no linear colors. It's all just sort of meshed together. And I have to tilt this so you can see that sort of gold in that. So this, if you were going to use this to do, I've misplaced pieces of my house. I guess I could pull off of another one I have. If you were going to do a house, and I did a shape of a house, and I used the 7 pieces, for that house, it was better for me to have single colors, a single color. And then I could fit in my house with that single color. And in the kids' imagination, they could say, okay, that's pretty good. That's a house. I can get that. Now, in this case, I took a newspaper, what do they call it? A filler part of the newspaper where they were advertising at Aldi's this furniture. And so I just cut it out and I stuck it on and cut it. And if this is outside of the puzzle, because of all the intricacy and the lines, it's not so apparent when you're putting that back together. That would be much too challenging for a very young child, but challenging enough for an older child. So as you get more intricate in the patterns, the process becomes more involved. And you're keeping that in mind when you're giving these challenges to the kids. Here's one where there's a pattern, and this is a pattern as it's repeating. But here it is with the same pieces mixed up. And either way, if I were to put this into a rectangle or into a pyramid, it would be very interesting to come up with that shape, but it would be mixed like this as opposed to this. And then if this was my alphabet, for example, and I had to construct an A out of these 7 pieces, the alphabet would be multi-patterned, but the intricacy would be in how do I make a shape of an A using all 7 pieces and not having anything left over. And that becomes a very, very challenging thing as you go through the alphabet. And it might be stylized, but it would be your style, and that would be a kid's responsibility. And then I have my very first one I made. I was in a hurry, and I quickly, and you know what? I just took pictures of this one. If you notice, something's wrong here. And that is that this is not right. This needs to be turned this way. There, now that pair now has its correct orientation. So again, this was from a grocery flyer, and they were advertising fruit and vegetables. Again, this was from a grocery flyer with berries. And this was, interestingly enough, a cellophane paper bag that had Easter candy in it. Just one of those little paper bags. And so you're seeing the white through it because it's cellophane and it's a plastic covering. And I just simply stuck it on and cut it. And as you saw in the video, after I had taken it apart, it took some thinking, and I was talking at the same time, but it took some thinking for me to come up with getting that pattern back together. But I did, and I just outlined the side, just the contrast that I have these white pieces of stickies, and that actually came from the leftover when I cut the drop piece off the rectangle sticky, and I just made those and stuck them around it in order to give myself a frame so that it doesn't move around when I'm playing with it. And so that's the kind of thing that you can do. And this is it's engaging. I know from experience. Even if you buy a commercially available tangram, the commercially available tangrams are very engaging, and they're usually plastic pieces. And I have a ton of sets of those that I've used throughout my teaching career. But then when I got the stickies, I said, oh man, this is great, because now we get to make our own tangram with our own images, our own concepts, etc. And that just adds a dimension of ownership to it. And it becomes very addictive and engaging. And you'll find that everybody in the family, including adults, would have fun as they construct these tangrams and challenge one another to complete them. And beyond that, this same material has a zillion uses. Now, let me tell you about the white stickies. This is a fill-a-bag item at Arts and Scraps, which means that whatever the current price is to get a grocery bag full of items or a small bag full of items, it may be $3 for a smaller bag, and a grocery size bag may be $8 or $7 or whatever. You can fill up an entire bag of these stickies for that $8. That would give you hundreds and hundreds of stickies to not only do this particular craft, but there are so many other applications. And I've used these in sign making. It makes a nice three-dimensional sign, and you can spray paint it and then stick it on a sign and die cut it if you have a die cutting machine or access to it, or you can hand cut it. There's just so many things that this material lends itself to. So while we're emphasizing the tangram, the same material, looking through different crafts on the internet or whatever, or Pinterest, you might see something that can be adapted with this material for different age kids in an entirely different challenge. And I've got several things that I do with these things, including, if you remember back, our button cards. So we had the buttons with the straws, and this again is the stickies. And we have these wonderful button cards that were made, and then we used them in a science kind of a scientific method, kind of an investigation. So just so many things. Anyway, that's pretty much it. And go back, look at the entire video for tangrams and how to make them. And at the end, I do suggest a lot of what I've talked about here. And the work you're going to have to do is to sit down and think about each of your children, and that multi-learning styles is very important. So there's the kinetic learners, there's those that you may have to talk more to, others that can look at the video and they visually see it, some you may have to let them handle it. And then you want to keep it age appropriate so that it's challenging, but not to a frustration. This is frustration-free play. So you're not going to ask a kindergartner to come up with a three-dimensional prism, but you certainly would have no trouble with asking a high schooler to come up with a three-dimensional prism and then give them some limitations, some constraints in order to force them to do some mathematical calculations, etc. And that could be built with the same stickies also. And so if there were any questions, we would be ready to answer them, and comments. We would have sent you out into chat rooms if you had common age groups of children so that you could talk about what specifically you would want your challenge to be for that child before you put the materials in front of them. And then that gives us a good base to share in our chat. And we always save our chat before we get off the air, because if anything has been presented in the chat, we want to be able to go back to it and use it. And I think they're posting these videos too, so you can always go back and look at the video too. So that takes us to the completion of this, and we want to thank Tawana for her involvement here. I really enjoyed that. We had a video that we made that addressed that particular topic specifically, and certainly these topics do overlap, and that's important to keep all these things in mind as we're working with our children and having fun with them. And then, of course, we want to thank Patrick, who's always ever present with his technical knowledge. And with that, we're going to ask for the last frame and do our evaluation. I haven't changed the evaluation, but we'll see. And I guess let's go back up to those second two, because I don't think I showed that. So then the challenge for this was that you're challenged to develop unique, engaging activities tailored for each of the children in your particular home using these tangrams. And I referenced that the one tangram that I have took a snapshot of, that tile is actually not in the right orientation, but it is in the right place, which is kind of cool. I saw that too late to change it. And then the next frame, of course, is the materials that we needed. And so we do push our arts and scraps things, but we certainly know that you don't have to go, even as inexpensive as our things are, we're looking for things that you can use from your home if you don't have anything from arts and scraps or either any other commercially available product. And so in the case of this activity, you could very easily just take a cardboard weight object. For example, if you took a cereal box and you cut out the face of it and turned it over and cut it up in those 7 pieces, and then you would turn it back over, you have your tangram without having to use any stickies or anything else. It would just be a matter of making sure you cut your square from the front page, incorporating whatever image you wanted. And then when you turn it over, you just make the same markings, 6 markings, and do your 6 cuts to get your 7 pieces. So you don't have to use stickies, but I just think stickies are just a great way to have versatility where you can create your own. So we're always looking at empowering you to use things that are readily available at home if you don't have access even to our very inexpensive items. So then, of course, we all have paper, scissors, ink, and papers everywhere with images, magazines, etc. So that's where we have that. And what I did put down is our sticky mix, and you don't really need the sticky mix, but if you have it, you're not confined to having white borders. You can use the black stickies and make links and border your tangram shape and then challenge people. So that does take us now to the last page, which is what I call a reflection. And this is where we get feedback from you. So what we'd like you to do, even if you're not available today to have shared with this video, when you do, if you would respond to these and somehow get them to Arts and Scraps, it helps us to know what we need to do to make it better. So there's 3 things here that you're asked to respond to, at least one of them, and you can respond to all 3. Maybe you thought this was the best thing ever, and so you picked the Rose statement, that's the last one, and you would say, what I most enjoyed about this was, and then tell us what it was. Maybe you're a bud and a rose. Well, I enjoyed this about it, but and I'm going to try this. This is something I'm going to try, and I'm intentionally been stimulated enough to want to try this. And then the thorn would be the thing that was challenging. You found it to be kind of challenging. Maybe the challenge that you had just spurred you on and you are enjoying that challenge, but it is challenging. found yourself at maybe a frustration point, maybe some concept that you're going to have to investigate that wasn't clearly delineated in this particular video, or you were challenged and you did not enjoy it because you don't know where you're going to go next in order to get understanding of that particular concept. And if you tell us what it is, we'll try to make sure we make a clarification in the future. So after you've done that and you have put that in your text box, we save those text boxes, and we ask that you do too, because you can hear what others have had to say, and then you get that benefit of the conversation from other parents just like you in the same situation you're in. And as Tawana said, there's no shame in getting information from as many sources as you can. We call it CASE, copy and steal everything. You know, that's legally free for you to copy and steal. So the sites that I send you to are free sites, just as long as you don't go and make money off of them, but they don't mind you downloading those curriculums, downloading the concepts, ideas, etc., and using them for your own personal advantage. Having said that, I want to say good night, and again, thanks to everybody that's going to view this film, and we hope it benefits you. And this has been an enjoyable experience, at least for me, and hopefully for you. So that's we're signing off, and goodbye.